Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says even though the Parliamentary Budget Officer has questioned the Liberal spending, it will continue. The head of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on the federal government to cut taxes to help Canadians deal with inflation. And we have details of how kids in Lethbridge are writing messages of hope on blankets in support of our city's most vulnerable.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is giving no indications his government plans to rein in spending after a report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer questioned the Liberals' plan to spend billions of dollars more in stimulus. Trudeau instead pointed out to the Liberals' plan to keep the debt as a percentage of the economy, known as the debt-to-GDP ratio, on a steady decline.
We've demonstrated that our concern for fiscal responsibility is continuing to be a priority for us. We will continue to look at a decreasing rate of debt to GDP in this country. We came into this pandemic with one of the best records in terms of our fiscal balance book, and we put that to work in terms of supporting Canadians through this difficult pandemic, both on the health side, but also on the economic recovery side. We're going to continue to make sure that we are keeping Canada's balance books healthy, while at the same time being there to support Canadians, because indeed, supporting Canadians through this crisis, supporting workers, supporting seniors, supporting small businesses, leads to better economic growth and performance once we're through this pandemic.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on the Trudeau Liberals to cut taxes to help Canadians deal with the rising cost of living. Stats Canada says prices have increased 4.8% year over year, making life much more expensive. Now, to discuss this in more detail is the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano, joining us now from Ottawa. Franco, let's start with the federal carbon tax, which has hit us hard in our homes and at the pumps.
That's right. It's really making the tough times tougher, driving up the price at the pumps, also making it more costly to heat our homes during these cold winter months. We've already seen the carbon tax increase twice during the pandemic. It's going to increase again to 11 cents per liter on April 1 of this year. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he's not stopping there. He wants to increase his carbon tax all the way up to nearly 40 cents per liter of gasoline by 2030.
How about the payroll tax bills? They're going up, meaning we'll be taking home less on our paychecks?
That's correct. And here are the numbers on payroll taxes. If you're making about $65,000 this year, you can expect to pay about $4,400 in payroll taxes, which is an extra nearly $400 this year. But it's not just payroll taxes that are going up. We are also seeing booze taxes going up again. So let's say you had a hard work week. Maybe your kids are driving you crazy and you want to enjoy that bottle of Pinot Noir with your better half. Well, the government will be reaching deeper into your pocket there as well.
Now, where does Canada compare to other countries around the world, which may actually be providing relief during the pandemic?
We're seeing our federal government make these tough times tougher while other countries are providing their taxpayers with some relief. You got South Korea that is reducing gas taxes by about 20%. You got Spain and France. They're both reducing electricity taxes. Italy cutting income and business taxes. You also have Poland and India. They're cutting some taxes as well. And how you have 11 American states that are reducing either income or business taxes. So you have other places, other countries that are making life more affordable, while our politicians in Ottawa are increasing the cost of living.
Great. Thanks so much, Franco. That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Ottawa. Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre blasted the Trudeau Liberals on the supply chain issues we're seeing here in Canada. Poilievre also says the vaccine mandate on truckers isn't really helping our situation right now.
If you walk into a grocery store and you see products on the shelves, thank a trucker. If you walk into a grocery store and you see empty shelves, thank Justin Trudeau. His policy of vaccine vendetta against our hardworking truckers is going to drive up the cost for our people, drive people out of work, and leave us with empty shelves.
Shortages at grocery stores across North America have grown in recent weeks. Retailers say supply chain struggles are real. They also say they're being plagued by labor shortages.
You're seeing it in general across the store. There is less supply. I don't know that it's category specific because I can tell you everyone we meet with, from pet food to detergent to cereal, they're all confronting the same challenges. You've got a combination of incredible consumer demand that has not waned since the outset of COVID in March of 2020. We estimate that demand is up about 11% year over year. That's incredible, right? That hasn't waned. And we heard reports from companies talking about they've had more positive tests in the past 2 weeks than they had in all of 2020. Those positive tests are taking people off the front lines. It's forcing companies to shut down manufacturing lines preemptively, and it's leading to just simply not enough supplies. The thing that we've been most vocal about is let's expedite testing to the essential workforce. Let's make it really clear we have to keep essential workers on the front lines.
The Trudeau Liberals have discussed the potential of decriminalizing drugs here in Canada. Law enforcement agencies are now speaking out against the idea. A number of top police officials in southern Alberta responded to ongoing discussions of decriminalizing drugs here in our province in Alberta. Police chiefs from Calgary, Medicine and the Blood Tribe say decriminalization is simply a bad idea.
Jurisdictions that have implemented decriminalization have added a range of administrative sanctions in replacement of criminal justice outcomes. These sanctions are necessary and important so that police officers in communities are equipped with tools to address their public order and public safety responsibilities while still promoting better health outcomes for people who use drugs.
Speaking for Indigenous policing, we are currently under-resourced due to working off a fixed underfunded budget. This lack of resources has put us in a position where we're unable to react efficiently to any possible negative consequence to the decriminalization of possession of hard drugs.
As already previously mentioned, our officers avoid charging individuals with personal possession, yet we are still experiencing these tragedies. I've spoken to many people in our community, and they share an interest in a compassionate approach to the issue of addiction and ask that we develop policies and strategies that will increase recovery while ensuring these policies do not create greater harm in our community.
Countries including Mexico, Belgium, the Netherlands and Portugal have already adopted different modes of decriminalization. The government of Alberta says it's working with the city of Lethbridge to address the drug crisis here in our city. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan says the city will be receiving more intox and detox beds soon to help those battling addictions.
Just last week, Minister Ellis was down and further discussing, we did a tour with Fresh Start and that treatment facility that we have just on the outskirts of town. But I'd also had the opportunity to ask him about the asks that came previously, and we're approved. So additional treatment facility beds in our community, but not only ours, but on the Blood Tribe as well as in Fort Macleod. And so having this is extremely important. So I was asking for a timeline, and it's been confirmed that it will be happening early spring. And so looking forward to that, because it's extremely important that we're helping these individuals with, especially those that are struggling with addiction.
Make sure you catch our exclusive one-on-one interview with Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan coming up in the second half of our show. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says Ottawa needs to do more to address the supply chain issues. Kenney says the federal government should back down when it comes to vaccine mandates for truckers.
I think we need to apply these policies with a heavy dose of common sense. And common sense tells us that we are at the peak of supply chain constraints across North America, around the world, huge inflation, and we can't afford to lose potentially thousands of truckers on our roads bringing groceries up from the U.S. and who knows, maybe rapid test kits as well.
When it comes to COVID-19 cases in the province, the president of Alberta Health Services says cases are going through the roof. Dr. Vernie Yu says we're at our highest hospitalization rate yet, with 1,171 in hospital battling the virus.
And this week, we reached numbers of total hospitalizations with COVID that is higher than at any point during the pandemic. Fortunately, the number of Albertans in ICU is still well below the total number of ICU patients that we cared for at the peak of the fourth wave, which was 313. Despite the somewhat positive news, we are seeing signs that our ICU teams can expect to see more patients needing their care in the coming weeks. In the past 7 days, the number of patients with COVID-19 in our ICU has increased by about 18%.
The province and the Alberta Medical Association are looking at returning to the bargaining table and working toward a new contract for Alberta physicians. Before returning to negotiations, both parties have agreed to address some high-priority healthcare issues. They include how the government and doctors have worked together to address the pandemic and the Omicron surge, physician compensation, and improved access to virtual care. Officials say balancing the payments for virtual and in-person options allows doctors to choose the best mode of care delivery without having to worry about compensation. After putting healthcare workers on unpaid leave for refusal to get vaccinated, the provincial government asked many of them to turn around and come back to work because of staff shortages regardless of their vaccination status. The Alberta Union of Provincial Employees represents approximately 700 of these workers and says this is a contradiction of policy.
It's one of those catch-22s because they've, on one side they've said, well, you're a health and safety risk and we've had to implement this policy. But what they have done is it's not just they're calling them back. There is conditions to that, which is the testing phase that they have to provide tests to prove that they are still COVID free, for example. And of course, we are going to again defend that. And if it goes to a further level, I mean, we will definitely be calling on, that contradictory nature of what they're doing. And at the end of the day, again, AHS was ordered to do this by the government of Alberta. So they didn't have a choice but to kind of back off on that policy.
You can catch a more in-depth version of that interview on BCN Weekend Edition coming up this weekend with Jeanette Rocher. Well, it's great to see the warmer temperatures have arrived here in southwestern Alberta. Speaking of Jeanette, she's here now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, could we be seeing double-digit temperatures again this weekend?
Yes, beautiful plus temperatures, Hal. And yes, that does include double digits for both a Saturday and a Sunday coming up this weekend. We are already experiencing much warmer temperatures, which is a great reprieve from what we've had recently. Overnight tonight, though, the overnight low -4. We are going to be seeing a 30% chance of flurries or showers this evening. Into tomorrow, we're seeing sunny skies and a high of 4 degrees. Those plus temperatures, as we talked about, are going to continue throughout the weekend and into next week. I will have more details about that coming up later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Seniors from Southern Alberta are set to receive some much-needed music. This is thanks in part to $10,000 in donations for the Concerts in Care program. The Health Arts Society of Alberta says that during the month of December, Albertans were able to buy or donate a live concert to a long-term care home or retirement community of their choice. Marin Curry-Roberts is with the Health Arts Society, and she says the money was desperately needed, and the people in Lethbridge came through in a very big way.
We will be doing about 10 free concerts in Lethbridge this year, and maybe even more if people continue to donate to us. There's always the ability to perform more concerts. The demand always exceeds our ability to supply performers. So yeah, we're really thrilled about that. We already have 2 of those concerts scheduled. Of course, the current situation with Omicron means that many facilities are in lockdown. So while that's happening, we're continuing to reach them with virtual concerts, but we can't wait to get back to performing for our audiences in person.
Concerts in Care launched in 2016, and they provide over 300 concerts for seniors in Alberta each and every year. Students from a Lethbridge school have been pretty busy this past week. The children are writing words of encouragement and putting them onto blankets to be distributed to our city's less fortunate. As Micah Quinn explains now, this movement is called Blankets of Hope, and it was started by 2 men from Brooklyn, New York.
4 years ago, the creators of Blankets of Hope, Mike and Nick Fiorito, reached out to Laurie McIntosh, who teaches at the Children of St. Martha School in Lethbridge. They were hoping for a Canadian ambassador, and McIntosh says the school jumped on the project.
For the past 4 years, they provided over 200 free blankets for our school. They shipped them to the border, and we go and pick them up because they don't have a supplier in Canada, and then we come back and we spend time writing letters of hope with our entire school community. I think it's just at this point where we've been talking about how much heaviness there is in the world, and this is just such a bright spot for us in January, always has been. From the time the boxes arrive and the children see the boxes being pushed in, and even staff see the boxes being pushed in, we look forward to that time together. We know it's going to build community amongst us, and we know it's going to give back to our own community in Lethbridge.
The kids at the school start by watching a video and then talk about what kind of encouraging messages they can write to brighten up the spirits of those who will receive the blankets.
It's actually beautiful, and they write their messages, and then we take the time with them to roll up their blankets, to tie the message on, and then we bring them down here to a table so they can see all of them, and we say a little prayer.
Students from the school say they love providing these words of support.
Because we know that we're putting a lot of love into this letter and a lot of love into the blanket, and giving to someone who might not be feeling that love and care. So it helps them a lot, and that makes us feel really good.
The blankets will be picked up by Alpha House, and then they will be distributed to members of the Sage Clan to hand out to our city's most vulnerable. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A family of 4 have been found frozen to death at a Manitoba field near the Canada-U.S. border on Wednesday. A Florida man has been charged with human smuggling in the incident. Police say the bodies of a man, woman, and a baby were found together in one area, while the body of a teenage boy was found a few meters away. Officials say all family members died from exposure to the freezing weather while attempting to cross the border from Canada into the United States. 47-year-old Stephen Shand of Florida was arrested and charged with human smuggling. Health officials in British Columbia say they're bracing for more hospitalizations as COVID-19 cases continue to climb. BC's top doctor says hospital admissions are expected to spike next week, even though the latest wave propelled by the Omicron variant may have already peaked in parts of the province.
We are still at the point where our hospitalization rate is going up, so new hospitalizations is still a concern, and we need to understand who is it that's being hospitalized and what can we do to try and affect that trajectory in the next few weeks. So if we look at it across BC, it's not the same everywhere, and we've seen that. We've seen that this started really to take off, particularly Omicron took off in Vancouver Coastal and in Fraser Health and on Vancouver Island first. We're now starting to see it slowing down a bit in Interior Health, and in Northern Health we're still on that upward trajectory. It was starting, Omicron moved into that community later than in other parts of the province, but it really is the highly populous Lower Mainland that is driving the epidemic curve for British Columbia.
Health experts are now recommending N95 masks to combat the COVID-19 variant Omicron. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recently updated its guidance to recommend people wear masks now used by healthcare workers.
So here is a 3M Aura, the mask that I'm wearing right now. This is a soft shell design like this Aura I found to be more comfortable for me personally. Right. Well, I would say that these masks here are the high filtration respirators. These are still better than cloth, but I would encourage people to get these. So the CDC has now brought more attention to the fact that certain masks are more protective than other masks. So high filtration masks, including N95 respirators, KN95, and KF94, provide better protection than cloth masks or even surgical masks. And so they are encouraging that if people are able to use higher filtration masks, that they should do so right now with the Omicron variant. So the previous guidance was to wear whatever mask you can. That was initially in the early stage of the pandemic. Then it was upgraded to say you should wear multi-layered cloth masks. And at that time, there was still a perceived supply issue in terms of medical grade masks, like surgical masks and N95 respirators. CDC has made it clear now that there is not a shortage of N95 respirators. So the CDC recommends that you should upgrade your masks, especially in areas that have a higher risk of spread, so indoor crowded places particularly.
Well, we had a much warmer day here in Lethbridge. A lot of the snow has melted, and that trend will continue as we work our way toward the weekend. A complete look at the weather forecast is coming up. Those Chinook winds have arrived once again, and with them, some much milder temperatures here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is back with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, word is we could see 10 or even 11 degrees by the weekend?
Yeah, you're right about that, Hal. We could see 10 degrees by Saturday and 11 degrees by Sunday, so it should be a nice double-digit weekend coming up for us. In the meantime, though, this evening we're looking at a 30% chance of showers or flurries. Low overnight of -4 up to +4 tomorrow for Friday. Lots of sunny skies. Saturday mainly cloudy, but there's that high of 10 degrees, high of 11 on Sunday. Into next week, we're looking at a high for 4 Monday, 7 on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, a high of 9 degrees. So I'm loving that, seeing that board across there, all plus temperatures. When you consider the average high for this time of year is -2, the average low -14. We are doing very well considering it is January. 16 was our high temperature back in 1981. In 1954, we had our chilliest day on record, which was -43 degrees. 8:19 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening at 5:06 p.m., giving us just under 9 hours of daylight, about 8 hours and 46 minutes. Over on the west coast, we're seeing Victoria at 8 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. Same thing for Vancouver. As we look to Edmonton, there is a risk of the freezing rain warning this evening. However, tomorrow there's going to be a light snow. -4 the high, 1 degree the high in Calgary. Calgary not looking too bad with the winds either. Saskatoon looking at a high of -6, with chance of flurries. Flurries expected in Regina as well, -3 and -7 in Winnipeg with flurries. Keep in mind, wind chill in all of these prairie cities are going to feel much colder than that. Same thing for Toronto. They are looking at a high of -11. Going to feel colder with that wind chill. Nice sunny skies, though. Beautiful sunny skies also expected tomorrow in both Ottawa and Montreal, with a high of 18 degrees in both of those cities. But of course, keep in mind that wind chill. They are looking at extreme cold with the wind chill in effect. -14 the high for Fredericton tomorrow. Sunny skies there, mix of sun and cloud in Halifax. -8 the high, -6 in Charlottetown, and 1 degree the high in St. John's, Newfoundland. With rain changing to snow, they could see up to 10 centimeters of the white stuff tomorrow. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Some good news for Western Canadian cattle producers. South Korea has lifted its temporary suspension of Canadian beef imports that were imposed after an atypical BSE case was confirmed in an Alberta cow last month. It was Canada's first case in 6 years and prompted 3 countries, South Korea, China, and the Philippines, to establish restrictions. South Korea imports around $90 million worth of Canadian beef each year. An atypical case can occur naturally in older cattle, while classical BSE is caused by a cow eating contaminated feed. The group representing the Canadian oil and gas industry says it expects capital spending in the sector to jump 22% this year to $32.9 billion. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers says that would mark the second straight year of big increases in investment. It estimates $21.2 billion in conventional oil and natural gas capital investment. That is up from $18.1 billion last year. Oil sands investment is expected to increase from $8.7 to $11.6 billion in 2022. 2 major U.S. airlines are reporting big fourth-quarter losses and are warning that the Omicron variant will further delay their recovery. American Airlines says it lost $931 million U.S. in the quarter, while United Airlines lost $646 million. Both are forecasting first-quarter revenue to be down at least 20% compared to the same period in 2019 before the pandemic began. Company officials say all of the variants of COVID-19 have caused wide swings in travel demand, making it harder for airlines to plan ahead. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 146 points in the day to 21,058. The Dow was down 313 points to 34,715. The S&P 500 was down 50 points to 4482, and the Nasdaq was down 186 points to 14,154. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 6 cents to 86.90 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 20 cents to 384 US. Gold was up 6 cents to 1839.35 US an ounce, and silver was even at 24.47 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.11 per bushel, barley's at $9.58, canola's at $22.72, and corn is at $10.57 per bushel. Live cattle were down 23 cents to 138.33, feeder cattle were down 23 cents to 161.18, and lean hogs were up 2.63 to 84.93. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.97 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the province and the Alberta Medical Association are looking at returning to the bargaining table and working toward a new contract for Alberta physicians. Before returning to negotiations, both parties have agreed to address some high-priority healthcare issues. They include how the government and doctors have worked together to address the pandemic and the Omicron surge, physician compensation, and improved access to virtual care. Coming up, an exclusive one-on-one interview with Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin, who will discuss some of the biggest issues impacting residents here in our city. That special interview is on deck.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lethbridge is looking for volunteers to mentor children and youth in their various programs. Volunteers commit to 1 2 to 3 hour visit per week for 1 year. They have many kids on their wait list that are looking for a big brother or a sister. Make a difference in a child's life and start something big. To apply, visit lethbridge.bigbrothersbigsisters.ca, and for more information, call 403-328-9355. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There have been a lot of renovations that took place at the Lethbridge Airport. The city's hoping that more people will fly in and out of our airport instead of making the drive to Calgary. To talk about this and other big stories impacting our city of Lethbridge, here is Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Mayor.
Thank you for having me, Hal.
Now, Blaine, let's talk about Council, the fact that they also endorsed a new airport incentive framework to create new potential agreements with airlines. How will that actually work?
So now it's a very new vote that was just done here at our previous council meeting here. So that framework is ongoing, and I think what it does is it circles back to, if I could, just a little bit about an action plan that we also released, and that in that action plan we're there to articulate our priorities, and this is definitely one of them, being our economic development for the community. So that's a very big part of it. Also, it brings in that level of transparency. I know a lot of people are trying to wonder, what's going on, the money that is spent out at the airport. This plan speaks a lot to that. So there's going to be a level of transparency, metrics as far as reporting back, and that helps us to build community trust. So I always circle back now to this action plan that we've got out there, because it seems like everything kind of fits in to that action plan. And it's not a new action plan, I might add as well, Hal, in that you talk about the airport, but many other things in that we kind of went around the MDP. So we spent a lot of time here the last year working through the MDP. So we're not reinventing the wheel with this action plan when we address different projects coming forward or initiatives like that of the airport. But we go back to the MDP and the time that we spent there with community engagement and what we heard, and that's how we bring that forward. So very action oriented. And but it's very new, and so it'll take some time, but we will definitely have more to share when that comes forward.
Now, you mentioned trust here, Blaine. Many Canadians have problems trusting their governments, especially throughout the pandemic. Lethbridge City Council recently launched the Gateway to Opportunity 2022 Action Plan. Now, you feel this action plan will really help build trust within the community? Maybe expand on that a little bit.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Hal. And definitely, as the action plan states, we have transparency. We want to make sure that we build transparency. We heard that a lot throughout the campaign. All of us had heard that that there was maybe some lack of transparency. So we really want to build on that transparency, and so that residents can see what we're focused on. The second thing is the reporting. The reporting is extremely important, and the community wants to know what is going on. And so it's important that we report back on a regular basis. And not only that, a lot of the questions that I had in the previous term and prior has been on community engagement. We want to make sure the community is engaged at every level, and so that they're part of the process, part of decision making, to be very honest, by bringing that information forward. So that community engagement is something that is extremely important. And I had a slogan throughout my campaign, I know, that was listening to Lethbridge, and I want to make sure that stands true and that we continue to do that. because that's how the decisions are made, by listening to our community.
Like, some of the key work identified for immediate attention includes supporting provincial partners in healthcare and recruiting even more doctors here to our region. As you and I've talked about in the past, there's a real doctor shortage. How can the city really do that and attract some more doctors, physicians that are sorely needed here in southwestern Alberta?
Thank you for that. You know, it's something that we hear all the time, that recruiting doctors is a provincial initiative, but still we want to make sure that we have them throughout our community. So what we've done is we've started to engage with different doctors in our community, as well as we've been in touch with the minister, and have had 2 conversations to date. We have more in the future, and we're trying to find ways that we can recruit, and not only recruit, but retain doctors within our community. We know that the number is extremely high. We want to make sure that we have physicians for those residents in our community. So we'll do all we can to work with the government to make this come to fruition, for sure.
Let's talk about the need for an emergency shelter here in the city, especially with some of the recent temperatures we've had below minus 25 degrees. What's the strategy moving forward for the city of Lethbridge in that regard?
Now, that is definitely something. Again, a shelter is a provincial initiative, but we definitely stay in touch with our provincial partners to let them know what is going on throughout our community. But as far as funding, that funding source does come provincially. So we're doing all we can. I spent a lot of time out talking with the homeless over the past few weeks, and especially during that cold snap. And nobody wants to be out in that weather. And so it's important that we touch base and we work with our community partners on this. We've got some great social agencies that help us throughout the community, but leave this with the experts and in that field, and they will bring that information forward to us. And it's something that we're definitely looking at, and it's something that's extremely important that we get a grasp on, for sure.
You know what's pretty cool is the fact that the city's adopted Oki, or Welcome, and Blackfoot, which is pretty cool here. But let's talk about how important it is when it comes to renaming some of the neighborhoods and the parks, as we discussed. How does that really impact reconciliation here in Lethbridge?
You know, I'm not a subject matter on this, but I want to be able to make sure that we leave this information for those experts, our Indigenous partners that we have throughout the community. Now, we do have an Indigenous Relations Department that gets this information, brings it back to council so that we can make informed decisions. And so truth and reconciliation, extremely important, not only in our city, but throughout our country. And I think we're making some good headway at that. We can always do better, but I think what we're doing so far is we're working hard on the truth and the reconciliation area, and we want to make sure that we just continue doing what we've been doing and carrying that forward.
Now, you've been mayor for a few months here. What have some of the biggest challenges been for you so far as mayor?
To be very honest, it was that's a really good question, Hal, because I think for me, it's been a time management. And it's quite a different role in that of a counselor going to mayor. And so time management has been extremely important. It seems like every 15 minutes of the day has got something. So if I would say anything, it would be time management. And that's definitely a number one thing. But I am finding that it is getting much easier with the support of staffing that I have here at City Hall. So it's helping, for sure.
As you and I have talked about in the past, we live in a beautiful city here with the coulees, and we've got some wonderful parks and trails as well. Henderson Lake. But I took my family by Henderson Lake the other day for a nice healthy walk, got some fresh air, and we saw a lot of dead ducks recently. Now, you're actually working with the School of Environmental Sciences at Lethbridge College to determine why there were so many dead ducks. Any answers yet?
Do you know what? I'm not a subject matter in this field, but I did do the same thing. I was out for a run and I noticed that same thing that you noticed, Hal, and a lot of community members have seen this. It's extremely sad. And you know what? I wish I had the answer to that, but of course, I'm not a subject matter expert in this. So we are working with different community partners and those that will be able to let us know what is happening. Is it because we're feeding and we shouldn't be feeding these ducks or whatever it is? And it's just something that we definitely need to find out, because it's really sad to see that. Extremely sad.
Yeah, it certainly was. Now, Blaine, you and a number of others on council have expressed your displeasure with the fact that the province decentralized EMS dispatch, and the province says they're saving about $6 million annually by doing that. by centralizing. How has this really impacted ambulance service here in our city in Lethbridge?
You know, we've heard a lot of different comments, concerns throughout our community, and how this is something that council has worked on for quite a few years. You know, with this idea coming forward, and it's been a concern. It's been a concern. Delayed times, ambulances not being in the community. It's something that we definitely have to make sure that we advocate on behalf of this community to the provincial government. Now, again, as I stated earlier with a couple of the other questions that you had, I'm not an expert in this field, but we do have some great people working on that. And our Chief Adair, our newly appointed chief, has been a huge focus of his. And we will be having future meetings that are already planned with the minister to further discuss this, and the other communities and partners in the other communities that have helped us throughout this process. Others that have had similar concerns and shared some unfortunate time delays in ambulance services. And so we'll be working with them, working with the experts, and making sure we get an answer to this sooner than later.
You mentioned Chief Adair, our new fire chief here in Lethbridge. Now, speaking of public employees, City Manager Craig Dalton is resigning to pursue another opportunity. Dalton has only been the city manager for less than 2 years. Now, this is what, the third city manager in the last 4 years? Why is the city going through so many managers? It almost seems like there's a bit of a revolving door at City Hall.
You know, Hal, that's a great question, and I wish I had the answer to it. You know, when we go through the process of hiring a city manager and we work with external agencies, experts in the field, and they bring names forward, and city council makes a decision to hire a city manager, you don't know the timelines for that city manager. If he or she has something that changes in their life that takes them to another location or to a different job, if you will. And so, you know, it's really tough to tell. I know most that or all that have left for, you know, personal reasons, life changes. And so, you know, each one does bring a different set of values and expertise, things that council look for on a regular basis. And we're really happy with what Mr. Dalton has done over the 2 years that he's been here, because it's definitely steered the ship, I believe, and council, I'm sure, agrees that same way, in the right direction. So we hope we find somebody that can continue moving forward with some of these different initiatives that Mr. Dalton has brought forward, because he's going to be greatly missed, but we will find somebody that will be able to continue the work that's going forward. I just wanted to add to this too, Hal, that we have a fantastic senior leadership team that is helping along the way too. So the city manager is but one role, and our senior leadership team will continue this organization going forward. So that's extremely important to know as well.
I was thinking maybe hire somebody locally as well who has a vested interest. You know, they grew up in Lethbridge, they know the area very well, and they're not apt to leave because they have no real connection to the city, right? So maybe that's kind of what we do with our reporters as well. We look at somebody from Lethbridge College graduating from the program. They've got friends and family here, so they're not apt to just take off and leave, you know? Now, Blaine, you work very closely with Lethbridge East, UCP MLA Nathan Newdorf. Has he said if the province would potentially look into helping the city to fund a third bridge?
You know what, the discussions are continually happening with the province, because I know the information came back and it was concerning if we were to build this bridge. I'll tell you something myself, I couldn't support a bridge at a 12, 13, 14, 15% tax increase. So to me, I've always thought that we need to think outside the box. And that is talking with our provincial partners and federal partners for that matter, and find if there's other additional grants. And, you know, I've also brought forward, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for a toll bridge. So that's a user pay. You know, there's been some that have been pro that, some have been against, but I'll tell you what, having a 12, 13, 40% tax increase, I'll tell you something, I would never support that myself. And so it couldn't come from taxation. So we'll continue to advocate with Minister of Transportation, and we'll try to get that through in another way, but definitely not with the tax increase that we've seen and was presented to us if it came from solely from taxation.
Yeah, that would be a huge tax hit, you're right. Now, speaking of working with the province, Blaine, what's the latest with help for those who are battling addictions? Now, we have the mobile injection site set up, but what about more treatment beds such as Intox and Detox? What is the province saying in working with the City of Lethbridge?
That's a great question. And just last week, Minister Ellis was down and further discussing. We did a tour with Fresh Start, and that treatment facility that we have just on the outskirts of town. But I'd also had the opportunity to ask him about the asks that came previously, and we're approved. So additional treatment facility beds in our community, but not only ours, but on the Blood Tribe as well as in Fort Macleod. And so having this is extremely important. So I was asking for a timeline, and it's been confirmed that it will be happening early spring. And so looking forward to that, because it's extremely important that we're helping these individuals with, especially those that are struggling with addiction. So we do have hope, it's coming forward for sure, and there's beds coming.
Well, that's great news. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal. Appreciate it.
Following the recent Texas synagogue hostage situation, we started thinking, well, how prepared is the average person for an active shooter situation? It's a shame we even have to ask such a question, but unfortunately, statistics are getting higher and higher for shootings, mostly in the U.S., but they do happen here in Canada as well. And when they do, it catches everyone off guard. Our next guest is a former police captain with over 20 years of service and personal experience with active shooter situations, specifically in schools, businesses, and places of worship. He is currently the Director of Training at Safe Defend, located in Kansas. Doug Parisi works on policy implementation, crisis response planning, and threat mitigation. He's considered an expert in these situations. We welcome him to the show today. Doug Parisi joining us via Zoom from Kansas. So great to have you on today, Doug.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I do appreciate talking to your audience.
Doug, so the website at Safe Defend, where you are currently a trainer, has some interesting information and stats on it. So what stood out most to me was the amount of casualties reported in such events when civilians get involved with thwarting the shooter, as opposed to waiting for police to come and handle the situation. I think it said something like 3 casualties if civilians get involved versus 14 casualties if you wait for police. This is staggering.
It is, and that goes down to what happens when you are prepared, when you understand that. One of the things I do want to caveat real quick with your audience is understand that these incidents are extremely rare. You're more likely to be struck by lightning than be in a situation like this. But what you have to understand is that they are possible. Whether it's a disgruntled employee or something that happens to work, a disgruntled customer, a domestic situation for a coworker or something you're involved in, these type of hostage situations or violent events sometimes just happen to occur around you. And it's about being prepared. And one of the hostages in this situation definitely commented that his training is what kicked in and enabled him to survive the situation. And so that's the reason we're talking here today.
That's fascinating. Maybe talk about your line of work and your experience with shooting events.
So what's interesting is I was in law enforcement for 20 years, but going all the way back to when I was 13 years old, my high school, the district that I was in, there was a shooting. Unfortunately, two children lost their lives, but it was at Parkway South Junior High. I was at Parkway Central. But I saw the aftermath of it. There was the trauma, the fear, the stuff that you would experience as a 13-year-old. And I saw what they did was, they locked the doors, they put up cameras, they got a school resource officer, they got 2-way radios for the staff. And it was all an idea like, hey, this is what we know we should be doing. The unfortunate thing is that too much has gone on in that time frame, but we're still doing the same thing. The recommendations are always access controls and having armed security and things like that. And what we look at is we understand that it's not always about that. A lot of the times what you have to do is be prepared. When I was with the statistics that you talked about civilians intervening, if we have seen incidents all across the country that sometimes don't even get reported, where somebody pulls out a gun and the next thing you know, somebody tackles them or they engage them or they neutralize that person that's meant to do harm. And so there aren't any casualties. And so the casualty count is low, then we don't have instances like that. Unfortunately, we have school shootings or some other violent attacks that happen at synagogues and things where somebody's not in a position to take advantage of the situation and neutralize it or stop it. And then that's where the casualty counts start to get really high. The reason is not that law enforcement isn't doing a great job. It's just that it takes them so long to get there.
That's right. I mean, we want to be really clear that the police should be the ones handling these situations, right? But like you said, sometimes it's just the timing of them. And in the meantime, so many more casualties can unfortunately happen. Maybe talk a little bit about the work that you do at Safe Defend. So first of all, what is Safe Defend?
So Safe Defend is an advanced notification system. What we do is that it's basically, the simplest way to put it is it's a fire alarm for sort of a hostile intruder. Unfortunately, here in the United States, and I can't speak for Canada, but I know that the information is similar, you're more likely to be in a hostile event at work than you would be at a workplace fire. If there's a workplace fire, though, you pull an alarm, it notifies the emergency services and notifies everybody in the building, and everybody knows the process and what they should do in order to prevent that. Our system comes with training, and what we do is that upon activation, people use, we have just basically just like fire alarms around a building, we have activation stations. And so if something happened, all you need to do is put your finger down on it. If you're pre-programmed in the system, that'll activate the system. And then what that does is it sends emergency notices to law enforcement. It sets off alarms throughout the building. And then you implement the training we've talked about whether or not you should run, hide, or fight. The biggest issue that you have is notification of where this threat is happening. So if you're in a large building or if you're in a synagogue and this is happening, say, near the front door, and you get a text or an email from our system, it'll tell you where the threat is. And that enables you to then make a decision. Well, I'm at the back, I'm in the cafeteria, I'm somewhere else. I can actually get out of this building, or that's right down the hallway. I better just barricade and lock down. And so that's what we do at Safe Defend, is work with schools, businesses, religious organizations, and government agencies to implement systems of notification.
That's amazing. And you also talked a little bit about the training there. So give us your insight on thwarting an active shooter or hostage situation. I mean, like we said before, the natural response is to wait for police because they're the experts. They'll know what to do, right? But there are things that we as civilians can do. What are they?
Yeah, ideally, you just said it best. Most of the time, we really want police who are trained and equipped to handle this type of situation, but there just comes down to circumstances where sometimes you have to act. If you're at the front office or if you're in an open area and that person is within feet of you, the chances of you getting away from them without being harmed are diminished based on your proximity to them. So you have to understand, what are my other options? In the situation we saw in the synagogue, he picked up a chair and threw it at the person. What people don't understand is that's a very effective thing, because what ends up happening is that person is going to flinch, they're going to look away, they're probably going to raise their hands up to block that chair. And so you make a decision, do I run from them or do I engage them? That's the type of stuff that we want people to think about. Mostly we do want people to get away from them. The principles we talk about, it's not really getting out of sight. It's barricading yourself on the other side of a locked door, making sure that if you can get out of that building, you know where to go once you're outside. That's a lot of what our training talks about is, you're in a big studio right there. So you would have to look around and say, what are my options? What rooms, what doors are unlocked? Where can I get if something were to happen? And if the threat is so close to me that all I have to do is say, get under that desk, where do I start moving immediately? Because staying under that desk isn't an option. And so that's the type of stuff we talk to people about, is looking around, understanding, maybe it's your boss's office is the only one that locks, and so everybody gets in there. But if you're in a big room with a lot of large glass windows and all it would take is to break that window to get in, then that's not a good room to be in. You should look to get out. That's the type of training that we're talking about giving people.
That's really absolutely fascinating. I mean, when you think of an active shooter and yourself, the last thing you want to be thinking about is engaging them, but you're actually teaching people to think about, can I engage this person? Am I close enough? How do you train people to do this, to respond to this? Are you, do you guys have, are you kind of acting things out, or is it more of a seminar type of a situation?
Some of the stuff you're talking about, so there's really no way to train somebody. There are techniques that you can use, but there's no way to train somebody who's unarmed how to take on an armed intruder. But what we want people to do is to just think about how to react in a situation like that. The best example we always use in training is to say, the moment you get on an airplane, the first thing they tell you what to do is how to get off in an emergency. Do they really think you're going to need that information? Of course not. But the same thing happens in your life. Just understand, what are my options? Does my community allow me to carry pepper spray? So I could use that if I carry that on my person as I'm going to and from my car, if I have it at the office. Things like that. If I had to use something as a blunt object, or a blunt instrument to strike somebody, how would I do that? If I am in a room that has a door with a small window on it, I can lock it. If a hand breaks that, or if that window breaks and a hand starts to come through it, what can I do to hit that hand to prevent them from getting to the lock or from hurting me? Those are the type of things we're wanting people to think about is, what can I do to protect myself long enough for law enforcement to get there and to neutralize that threat? And so that's the biggest thing that we do. One thing real quick, the safe defense system is designed to prevent you from having to call emergency services. You don't have to do it in a fire alarm. I don't know why we expect people to do it in an emergency. What we want is an alarm to go off. And the moment I hear that alarm, I hear the sirens and strobes going off, and I'm getting texts and emails telling me where this threat is happening, know that law enforcement's getting that same information. So now all of a sudden I've removed the 75 seconds it takes to call 911 and relay enough information for them to get rolling this way. That text can go directly to the dispatcher, and they can immediately send officers within seconds.
Wow, it's amazing. How should people be talking to their kids about active shooter situations? Because, let's face it, it seems that the majority of these situations do seem to happen at schools, unfortunately. Those are the ones that are making the headlines anyways. So unfortunately, our kids are the ones that are kind of caught up in this.
Well, it kind of depends on the age. I mean, obviously elementary or middle school or the high school kids, but especially at the elementary level, tell them that their teachers have plans, the teachers have practiced this and rehearsed it with them. And so that they need to make sure that they follow the instructions with that teacher. When the teacher tells them to be quiet and get in the corner so they can turn off the lights, then they do that. So the parents need to reinforce that, but they really need to enforce the fact that the teachers do have a plan, the teachers can keep them safe, and that in this situation, it's extremely unlikely that they'll be harmed. And that is true. Understand, there was a great study that just came out of Idaho here in the United States that showed the safest place for students is behind a locked door. And then as you get older with the kids, and all of a sudden now the kids might say, if they're 5th, 6th, 7th grade, they could start participating with helping with the barricade, making sure you're putting objects in front of the door, stuff like that. And then as you start to get into high school, you do need to talk to them about what they would do if they were in a cafeteria, look for exits, look for the closest classroom, but make sure that they know that they need to get on the other side of a locked door. Here in the United States, there have been lots of studies over and over that shown that no active shooter has ever breached the locked door. It takes too much time to try and kick in a door or shoot out a door. You can't really even do those things. And so they're just going to move on if you're on the other side of a locked door. Those are the type of things we need to make sure our kids emphasize. But most importantly is to tell them that this is extremely, extremely unlikely that something like this would ever happen. But it's not about the probability, it's about the possibility. Since it can happen, just be mentally prepared for it.
Excellent advice there. How should businesses respond or be prepared for these types of situations?
So the most important thing is the biggest lesson that we can learn from this synagogue shooting is the fact that they had a lot of the security that you would think about. They had cameras, they had access controls, they had locking systems, all that sort of stuff. But this is one of the things that businesses have to understand. A lot of times these things happen with people that already know how to get in your building, whether it is a current or former employee, disgruntled ex-employee, a customer that was harmed in some way or had a family member harmed, the domestic situation, or even a terrorist event. They're going to figure out a way to get in. In this situation in the synagogue, he just asked to come in, told them he needed some help, and they invited him in because he compromised their charity in order to bypass all the security they have there. And so this is where notification and immediate access to everybody in the building is so important. When you have a system like Safe Defend or any notification system, you know upon activation that law enforcement's en route. Unfortunately, in this situation, they had to wait till somebody called 911. There was some people that saw it on FaceTime that were calling it in, but that's a slower process. We'd rather have something that immediately notifies everybody in the building they're under threat, and therefore they can start to take steps. And so it's all about layers. If you have an armed security or if you have a gate at the front that prevents people from coming into the parking lot, that's good, but that's not going to stop it. If you have access controls with key cards and things like that, understand I could just wait for someone in the parking lot and get their access control. And so there's always ways to get in. So it's all about layers and procedures. But most importantly, they have to start having training, where to go, what to do, how the process gets notified, what the responsibility of the employees are in that situation. If a business isn't doing that thing, they are opening themselves up to liability because this is a known threat. very similar to a chemical spill or a tornado, some climactic events, or even just a fire. If you're not training your employees on what your expectations are and what the procedures are in a situation like this, there could be liability should something ever happen.
Now, Doug, do you have any success stories from someone who you trained maybe that managed to get themselves out of a scary situation, or any other success stories?
So if you remember the Las Vegas shooting, where unfortunately it was at the Mandalay Bay and the guy was up on the 34th floor and he was shooting down into the crowd. We have several clients in the Las Vegas area, and several of our clients sent us back, and we have their quotes. But they basically, what we talked about in a mass casualty event like that, you're going to hear a lot of gunfire, and then there's going to be a pause of that gunfire. That usually means that the person is reloading, that the person is engaged otherwise. And so it's during that pause of information that you need to start moving. If you're not barricaded, hidden behind a door, which they weren't because they were out in an open field or an open area, they started moving every time the pause in gunfire. And there was 3 of these women together, and they were with their boyfriends, and 2 of them, their husband, 1 boyfriend, and they said, go, and they like, no, stay here, and the men were like, stay, and the women were like, no, go, he's not shooting. And they were able to move, and then they got down. And then what they started doing is during the shooting, when they were protected, they started looking for the next place that they were going to run to, and they were able to kind of piggyback down during these breaks in gunfire. And so those are the things that you think about is if somebody is engaged and you hear a lot of gunfire, quite a high number of gunfire in succession, likely they're reloading, and that might be the time to take action or to move away from them. And so that's what we talk about. And so that was something that definitely those people said that training, that knowledge, that thought process that put in their mind gave them the plan they needed to get away from harm in that situation.
Wow, I literally got chills, Doug, when you were recounting that story. I could picture it so well. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your insights and your expertise with us. We really appreciate it.
Certainly. I appreciate the opportunity.
Doug Parisi is a former police captain and the director of training at Safe Defend. So happy to have him on today. I'm Jeanette Roche. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.